All right, so today we are going to deep dive into AI text generation. I think a lot of our listeners are probably seeing it, in action already. Articles, marketing copy, even code. And you're curious about the tech behind it all, specifically RAG and CAG.
Yeah.
We're going to break down these two really powerful approaches so you really understand how they work and why they matter.
I think, it's more than just computers spitting out words.
Mm.
It's about how they access and process information to create that content. And that's really where RG and CAG come in, like two different operating systems for AI writers.
Okay, I love that analogy. So let's start with RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty complex, but if we break it down, I think it's actually pretty intuitive.
Yeah, think of it this way. RAG is like a detective. It's got access to this massive database. And when you ask it a question, it doesn't just rely on, what it already knows. It actually actively searches through its database. And that could be anything from the entire internet to a specific set of documents. It finds the most relevant information and then uses that to craft its response.
So it's not just pulling from some internal knowledge bank. It's actually going out and doing research in real time.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful. Take chatbots, for example. A lot of them use RAG to pull information from various sources to make sure that their answers are up to date and tailored to your specific question.
That makes sense. So if I asked a chatbot about, say, the latest update on a specific product, it could pull that information directly from the company's website or knowledge base instead of just giving me some generic pre-programmed answer.
Precisely.
Well, okay.
Now let's move on to CAG, Context-Augmented Generation.
Okay.
This one is all about control and consistency.
Okay, so if RAG is like the detective, is CAG more like a novelist working from a really detailed outline?
That's a great analogy, yeah. CAG is all about providing the AI with a very specific context, like a set of data points, guidelines, or a particular writing style, and then it generates text strictly within those boundaries. So this makes it perfect for tasks where consistency and adherence to specific rules are paramount, things like generating financial reports or legal documents.
So, for example, if a company needs to generate reports that follow a very strict format and use specific financial metrics, CAG would be the ideal tool because it can just make sure that that output is always aligned with those requirements.
Exactly. And because it's working within a predefined context, it's also less likely to make factual errors or go off on tangents.
So RI is like the dynamic researcher,
Right.
always updating its knowledge, while CAG is like the meticulous craftsman,
Yes.
really focused on precision and consistency. So how do they actually compare head-to-head? Our source material has this handy-dandy comparison table. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with data access. RAG goes out and fetches information live, while CAG relies on the data that has been given up front.
So RAG is constantly learning and adapting, while CAG is more static, working with a fixed set of knowledge. What does that mean for their actual performance?
So that directly affects their flexibility.
Right.
RAG can adapt to new information and change its output based on what it finds, making it more versatile but potentially less predictable.
Okay.
Whereas CAG sticks to its script, which makes it more reliable in terms of consistency but potentially less accurate if the provided information becomes outdated.
So it's a trade-off.
Exactly. It really depends on, your priorities and the specific task. Another crucial difference is their focus. RI prioritizes accuracy, while CAG prioritizes coherence.
Okay, I'm a little confused by that one. What does that mean in practical terms?
Think of it this way. RAG, with its access to a vast database, is like a journalist reporting breaking news.
Oh.
It's all about getting the facts right, even if the writing might be a little rough around the edges.
So it might not be winning any literary awards, but you can trust it to deliver the most up-to-date information.
Exactly. Now, CAG is more like a novelist crafting a well-structured story. The language is polished, the flow is seamless, but it's not necessarily pulling from, the latest headlines.
Makes sense. So for tasks where clarity and consistency are key, like writing a marketing brochure or a technical manual, CAG would be the better choice.
Precisely. But if you need the absolute latest information, like in a news report or a research paper, then RI's accuracy might outweigh its stylistic shortcomings.
Okay, that makes the distinction much clearer. Now, what about reliability? Does the fact that RAG relies on external sources make it less reliable?
It's definitely something to consider. Since RAG pulls information from various sources, there's always a chance it might encounter inaccurate or biased information, leading to potentially flawed outputs.
So it's only as good as the sources that it's pulling from, which means you need to be very careful about the data that you feed it.
Right.
CAG, on the other hand, works with a controlled set of information, so it's less susceptible to like those external biases or misinformation.
Exactly. But remember, that also means the CAG can become outdated if the information that it's given isn't updated regularly.
Right, so it's another trade-off. RA is more dynamic and up-to-date, but potentially less reliable.
Right.
CAG is more consistent and controlled, but potentially less current.
Right.
What about speed? Does the fact that RA needs to go and like fetch data make it significantly slower than CAG?
Generally speaking, CAG is faster because it doesn't need to do any external research. It's like having a recipe versus having to search for one online every time you cook. But the actual speed difference really depends on the complexity of the task.
Okay, so if I need something simple generated quickly, like a short product description, CAG might be the faster option.
Yeah,
But if I need a more complex piece of content, like a research paper ARG might be worth the extra time.
that's a good way to think about it, yeah. It's important to consider the specific needs of the task and weigh the pros and cons of each approach.
Okay. So it's not just a simple case of one being better than the other. It really boils down to what you need the AI to do and what you prioritize. Speed, accuracy, consistency, and so on.
You got it. However, what if we didn't have to choose?
Oh.
What if we could combine the strengths of both RAG and CAG? That's where things get really interesting.
Wait, you can actually do that. Combine them.
Our source material hints at that possibility, yeah. Imagine an AI system that can seamlessly switch between RAG and CAG depending on the specific requirements of the task at hand.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Give me an example. Paint me a picture.
Imagine a virtual assistant,
Okay.
and it uses Argy to answer your general questions by searching the internet.
Okay.
But when you ask it to draft a formal email, it switches to CAG mode to ensure that the tone and the style are appropriate.
So it's like having two specialized AI writers in one. That's incredible.
Exactly. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for AI-powered content creation.
This is mind-blowing stuff. It really highlights why understanding these technologies is so important. As AI becomes more and more prevalent in our lives, we need to be aware of its capabilities and how it works.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of the key takeaways here. There's no clear winner between RAG and CAG. Choosing the right approach depends entirely on what you're trying to achieve.
So if you need information that is up to date and a system that can adapt, RAG is the way to go.
Yes.
But if you need consistency and a system that can adhere to strict guidelines, then CAG is your best bet.
And the really exciting possibility is this future where AI systems can seamlessly blend these approaches, adapting to different tasks and contexts.
That's definitely a future I want to see. It's like having an AI writing partner that can handle any task you throw at it. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think we need to dig a little deeper into the nuts and bolts of how RAG and CAG actually work.
You're right, yeah. Understanding the underlying technology will give you a much better appreciation for their capabilities and limitations.
Stay tuned, because in the next part, we're going to go beyond the surface and explore the inner workings of these fascinating AI systems. We'll unpack the concepts of transformer models and retrieval systems and see how they power these impressive feats of language generation.
Welcome back. So I hope you're ready to delve a little deeper into the inner workings of RAG and CAG. Let's start by peeling back the layers and taking a look at the engine that drives both of these systems. Transformer models.
Okay, transformer models. Sounds pretty sci-fi. Break it down for me. What are we talking about here?
Well, in essence, transformer models are a type of neural network specifically designed for understanding and generating text. They've really revolutionized the field of natural language processing, or NLP, powering everything from language translation to, of course, AI text generation.
Neural networks, NLP. I'm starting to feel a little lost. Can you give me like a simple way to visualize how these transformer models actually work?
Sure. Imagine a huge library where each book represents a piece of text the model has been trained on. The transformer model acts like this super fast librarian who can instantly analyze the relationships between all the words and sentences in all those books, understanding context and meaning in a way that was previously unimaginable.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So these models are trained on massive amounts of text data, and that's how they learn to understand language and generate new text.
Exactly. And the beauty of transformer models is their ability to analyze relationships between words across these long sequences of text, allowing them to capture context and nuances that were previously lost on older AI models.
So how do these transformer models actually fit into ARGA and CAG? They both use them, right?
Absolutely. They're the foundation of those systems, but how they utilize them differs. Let's start with RAG. Remember how we talked about it being like a detective? Well, the transformer model is its brain. It's capable of understanding your questions and figuring out what information it needs to search for.
Okay, so the transformer model is what allows RAG to understand the intent behind my question and formulate like a search query.
Precisely. But it needs a way to access and retrieve relevant information from its database, right? That's where retrieval systems come in.
Retrieval systems, is that like a search engine for AI?
You could say that, yeah. It's a system specifically designed to find and retrieve the most relevant information from the AI's vast knowledge base. You'd be searching through the entire internet, a specific set of documents, or even a knowledge graph, which is like a map of concepts and relationships.
So in RAG, the transformer model acts like a detective formulating a search query, and then the retrieval system is like its research assistant, going out and finding the necessary clues.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Once the retrieval system has gathered that relevant information, it's fed back to the transformer model, which then uses that information to craft its response.
So it's a collaborative process, with the transformer model understanding the question and the retrieval system finding the supporting evidence.
Exactly. Now, CAG is a bit different. While it also relies on a transformer model to generate text, it doesn't have this active research component. Instead, it's given a specific context up front, and the transformer model uses that to guide its writing.
So instead of searching for information in real time, CAG's transformer model is working within a predefined set of rules and parameters. Does that mean there's no retrieval system involved at all?
Not necessarily. Some CAG systems might use a basic retrieval system to pull in specific pieces of information from a limited database, but the focus is really on using the provided context to control the output.
Okay, so CAG's transformer model is more like a skilled writer following a detailed brief. It's not doing independent research, but it's using the provided information to craft a well-structured and coherent response.
Exactly. Now, it's important to note that the quality of the output in both RAG and CAG is heavily dependent on the transformer model and the data it was trained on. The larger and more diverse the training data, the better the model will be at understanding and generating human-quality text.
That makes sense. It's like saying the more books the librarian in our analogy has read, the better they'll be at finding the right information and understanding the nuances of language.
Precisely. And this is where we see a lot of ongoing research and development in the field of AI text generation. Researchers are constantly working on training larger and more sophisticated transformer models to really push the boundaries of what's possible.
So it's a rapidly evolving field, which is incredibly exciting, but let's bring this back down to earth for a moment. We've talked a lot about the technology, but what does all this mean for real-world applications? How are RAG and CAG actually being used out in the wild?
That's a great question, and I think it's best illustrated with some real-world examples. Let's start with RAG. Remember how we talked about chatbots? They're a perfect example of how RAG can be used to provide dynamic and personalized responses.
Right. Instead of relying on a fixed set of pre-programmed answers, a chatbot powered by RAG can access vast amounts of information to answer your questions in a more natural and conversational way.
Exactly. But it goes beyond customer service chatbots. Think about applications in healthcare, where a medical chatbot could access the latest research and clinical trials to provide patients with up-to-the-minute information.
Or in finance, where a financial advisor chatbot could analyze market trends and provide personalized investment advice based on real-time data. The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling.
They are. Now let's move on to CAG and its real-world applications. Its strength lies in its ability to generate consistent and controlled content, which makes it ideal for tasks like generating legal documents, financial reports, or even marketing copy.
Okay, so for tasks where accuracy and adherence to specific guidelines are paramount, CAG really shines.
Exactly. And its applications are only growing as the technology advances. Imagine using CAG to generate personalized learning materials for students, tailored to their individual needs and learning styles.
That's fascinating. It's like having a custom textbook generator that can adapt to each student's strengths and weaknesses.
Precisely. And in the realm of research, CAG could be used to automate the generation of hypotheses, experimental designs, and even scientific papers, freeing up researchers to focus on more creative and strategic tasks.
So we're seeing that both RAG and CAG have the potential to revolutionize a huge range of industries, from customer service to healthcare to education and beyond.
Absolutely. And as these technologies continue to evolve, we can expect even more innovative and impactful applications to emerge. But it's important to remember that these are still relatively new technologies, and there are challenges to overcome.
Right, like we discussed earlier, the quality of the output depends heavily on the transformer model and the data it was trained on. And there's always the risk of bias creeping in, especially with RAG and its reliance on external data sources.
That's a crucial point. We need to be mindful of these limitations and ensure that these systems are developed and used responsibly with appropriate safeguards in place.
It sounds like there's a lot more to unpack here, especially when it comes to the ethical implications and the potential impact on society.
You're absolutely right. And that's precisely what we'll be delving into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the challenges and opportunities presented by these powerful AI technologies and consider what the future holds for RAG and CAG in our rapidly evolving world.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into RAG and CAG. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical intricacies of transformer models and retrieval systems to those real-world applications that are already transforming industries. But, as with any powerful technology, there are also important ethical and societal implications to consider.
You're absolutely right. As RAG and CAG become more sophisticated and more integrated into our lives, we really need to be mindful of the potential challenges and make sure that we are using these tools responsibly. One of the biggest concerns with any AI system is bias. And that's especially true for RAG, which relies on external data sources.
We touched on this earlier, but can you elaborate a little bit more on why bias is such a big issue for ag and how it might actually manifest in the real world?
Sure. So think about it this way. If a RAG system is trained on a data set that reflects existing societal biases, whether it's gender bias, racial bias, or any other form of prejudice, it's likely to actually reproduce those biases in its output. So, for example, a RAG-powered hiring tool trained on a dataset of resumes from predominantly male executives might unfairly favor male candidates over equally qualified female candidates.
That's a really sobering thought. So it's not just a matter of the AI being, bad or evil. It's about the data it's been fed and the potential for those biases to, be amplified if we're not careful.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to RAG. Even CAG, with its focus on controlled content, can be susceptible to bias if the predefined context or guidelines reflect biased assumptions or perspectives.
So how can we mitigate this risk? Is there a way to, de-bias these AI systems?
It's a complex challenge for sure, but researchers are working on various approaches. One strategy is to very carefully curate and balance the training data, making sure that it represents a diverse range of perspectives and experiences.
So it's about being much more mindful of the data that we feed these AI systems, making sure it's as representative and unbiased as possible.
Precisely. Another approach is to actually develop algorithms that can detect and mitigate bias in both the input data and the output generated by the AI.
So it's like having a built-in bias checker that can flag potential issues and help us correct them.
That's the idea, yeah. But it's an ongoing area of research, and there's no easy fix, right? It requires a multifaceted approach, combining technical solutions with ethical considerations and human oversight.
It sounds like it's not just a technological challenge, but a societal one as well. We need to be having these conversations about bias and fairness, not just in the context of AI, but in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is a reflection of ourselves. And if we want it to be fair and unbiased, we need to address those issues in society as a whole.
Now, beyond bias, what are some of the other societal implications we need to be thinking about as RAG and CAG become more prevalent? One thing that comes to mind is the potential impact on jobs. If AI can generate high-quality content, what does that mean for writers, journalists, and other content creators?
It's a valid concern, yeah. As with any technological advancement, there's always that potential for job displacement. However, I believe it's more likely that AI will augment human capabilities rather than replace them entirely.
So instead of thinking about AI as taking over our jobs, we should be thinking about how it can help us do our jobs better.
Exactly. Imagine writers using RAG to research and gather information more efficiently, freeing up their time to focus on the creative aspects of their craft. Or journalists using CAG to generate, first drafts of news articles based on factual data, allowing them to spend more time on analysis and interpretation.
It's like having an AI assistant that handles the more tedious tasks, allowing humans to focus on what they do best: critical thinking, creativity, and building relationships.
Precisely. It's about collaboration, not competition. And ultimately, I believe this collaboration between humans and AI has the potential to lead to a much more informed, efficient, and creative society.
That's a hopeful vision. But it's also important to acknowledge that there are potential risks and unintended consequences that we need to be prepared for. For example, if AI becomes like the primary source of information and content creation, how do we ensure accuracy and prevent the spread of misinformation?
That's another critical challenge. We need to develop very robust mechanisms for verifying the accuracy and trustworthiness of AI-generated content. This could involve things like source attribution and transparency, allowing users to understand where the information is coming from and how it was generated.
So it's about building trust in these systems and making sure that users can make informed decisions about the content that they are consuming.
Exactly. And it also requires educating the public about the capabilities and limitations of AI so they can be critical consumers of information and not blindly trust everything they read or see online.
It's like media literacy for the age of AI. We need to equip ourselves with the tools and knowledge to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape.
Well said. And it's not just about individual responsibility. We also need to consider the role of governments and regulatory bodies in setting ethical guidelines and standards for the development and use of AI.
So it's a collaborative effort involving researchers, developers, policymakers, and the public all working together to ensure that AI is used responsibly and ethically.
Exactly. It's a complex challenge, but I believe it's one that we can overcome if we approach it with a spirit of collaboration and a shared commitment to harnessing the power of AI for good.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the technical intricacies of RAG and CAG, the potential benefits and risks, and the broader societal implications that we need to be mindful of as we move forward.
It's been a fascinating conversation, and I hope our listeners now have a much deeper understanding of these very powerful AI technologies and the transformative impact that they're having on our world.
It's been a real eye-opener for me, and I want to encourage everyone to continue exploring this topic and engaging in these really important conversations about the future of AI and its role in our lives. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into RAG and CAG. We'll catch you next time.